Good afternoon, folks. My name is Sean Miles of Platepus Global Consulting, and I just want to share our coaching methodology with you and kind of give you the background and foundation for what comprises our coaching with executives and team members going forward and so forth. So there's a couple key points. First key point is one of the things that we want to do is make sure that we're transferring knowledge to the person that we're working with. When we're coaching people, we don't want to be holding knowledge and withholding everything and making sure they're not independent, which I know sometimes can be an issue with consulting in general, is that sometimes you just get enough information so you're dependent on the consultant, which creates more revenue. So what we want to do is we want to transfer the knowledge as quickly as possible, but also be around to support and make sure that we can ensure success of the coaching moving forward. Now the second thing as far as coaching goes, one of our major beliefs is that people typically have the answers within them already. So we know what we need to do. Sometimes we just don't have the discipline, we don't have the understanding, or we have our logic gets clouded by a number of other things going on, whether it's habit or fear or emotions or whatever that may be. So we kind of try and outline a path of clarity for people so they can really make the decisions that they need to do and not keep doing the wrong things over and over again. So there's just a couple things that I want to talk about as far as the foundation of coaching. And the first thing is a little bit about the brain, the neuroscientific foundation. So we'll do this quickly. And my version of the brain, you think you get better. I've drawn the brain so many times, but it doesn't get better at any time at all. So what happens is this part of the brain is the fear center of the brain. And that was the first one that evolved in the evolution of the brain and in the species and so forth. So what that is the fight or flight. So what that does, if you've taken biology, which I know you all have in high school, is when you're afraid, you'll either fight and you'll stand up or you'll run away. So it's very simple, very primitive, but it drives a lot of the stuff that we do. Now, of course, we're not running from dinosaurs anymore, but some of the fears that we have today are fear in our status, fear of socio-economic status, and fear of anything going on, money, finances, all that kind of good stuff. So it's the modern day fears that are getting us now. So the basic foundation is the fear. The second part of the brain that evolved was the habit forming part of the brain. Now the habit forming part of the brain, in conjunction with the fear part of the brain, they take up most of our decision making and they influence almost everything we do throughout the day. So the habit part of the brain, what that is it's a part of the brain that's wired for us to create patterns so we can just do things over and over again as efficiently, as effectively as possible. So some of the stats that support that, and you'll have to verify this to make sure they're 100% because I'm somewhat paraphrasing, but they say that the brain uses about 80% of all calories at rest, while it's only 2% of our body mass. So think of the huge horsepower the brain is using just when it's at rest. So when you're thinking hard as well, think of what that takes and what that takes out of you. So what these two centers of the brain are for is to make things easy, make things efficient, make sure you live. So those are keeping us alive. But that's very, very powerful and it drives a lot of our decisions. So in the habit part, what that does, for example, is it wants to create something that's routine so we don't even have to think about it, thus conserving energy. So an example of that would be in my old job, what I do is I drive one familiar path every single day. So when I changed to a new job, I started driving a different path, obviously. So I wasn't thinking about which path to take. A couple of the times what I do is I'd keep driving to my old job. And the reason for that was that path was neurologically wired into my brain. And that's an example of what makes things easy and how the habit part works. Now that's a real benefit for us because it makes things easy, makes sure don't have to think about what sock we put on in the morning, what side of our face we shave, our leg we shave. But what that does too is it creates a situation where we've got preconceived notions and habits in there that aren't necessarily true or right. So we might not take all the information and process it properly. So we've got something stuck in our head that we think is automatically true and we act on it consistently. So what we want to do is we want to start looking at how we can create new habits, accurate habits, and better, more effective habits in this area to move us forward. So that's section 2 of the brain. Section 3 of the brain is a small part of the brain, and that's all revolves around cognition and thinking, and that's where the real horsepower gets drawn and all the energy gets used. So the prefrontal cortex here is your thinking and rational part of the brain. But unfortunately, these two parts of the brain typically will overpower that part of the brain. And so if we're not doing the thinking and we're not processing things properly, then we'll get overrun by fear, overrun by habit. And if the habit's wrong or the fear is irrational, then we're not doing the things that we need to be doing. So we've got a real balance between these two, or these three, I guess. An analogy of that is if you think of your cognitive centers as one thing, and you think of your fear and habit centers as another thing. So if you can just visualize an elephant, a giant elephant, say in India, and it's walking along, and on top of that elephant is a little skinny guy, and he's trying to guide this elephant, and they're at a fork in the road, and he's trying to guide it down one specific fork in the road. The elephant is the fear and the habit, and basically the emotions. So you got this giant elephant there, and you're trying to coax him down the right road. And the guy on top is the cognition, or the thinking part. So as hard as he tries to make the elephant go down the right path, or the path that he thinks it should go, a lot of the times the fear and the habit, or the elephant, derails that process. So that's a little bit about the neuroscience of how we approach some of the coaching. The second fascinating part about the coaching side of things is the thermostat idea. And now what happens is, primarily in the habit part of the brain, we have an internal thermostat of comfort. So all in here, say that's 25 degrees, and that's our comfort level. I'm just using the 25 degrees as an analogy. Basically think of this as our comfort level. And that's where we like to be. What we don't like to change, what we don't want to get out of, all that kind of good stuff that makes us comfortable. So the interesting part about this and this thermostat part is this is heavily influenced by what happens to us in the formative years when we're kids, whether we had someone negative in our life that told us we couldn't do what we did, and it could have been from a sports field, a coach, a parent, all those types of things influence us, and it sets our thermostat right there. So what happens when you have your thermostat set is when you do some things outside of the thermostat, your body wants to create consistency and take you back to the thermostat and create that consistency again. Because in the brain and the body, they don't like to be out of balance, out of homeostasis. So if you're performing less than you should be, what will happen is typically you'll make the adjustments to perform back up where you're performing before. If you're performing higher than your thermostat is set, what will happen is, unfortunately, you'll also get shifted down to your regular thermostat state and get set there as well. So you got that thermostat there. So what we want to try and do in the coaching is we want to set a new thermostat level. And the way we do that is creating a disruption. As like we said before, the brain and the body, they don't like disruptions. So they're going to adapt to make things consistent. So if we give them enough disruptions that are positive to move them to the second thermostat level, what the brain and body does automatically is it moves the whole thermostat level up to its baseline. And that's going to be the increase in performance. So that's good habits, that's relationships, that's how you view things, positivity, and all that kind of good thing. So we're going to give you all kinds of tips and tricks to create this new thermostat up here. And basically that's some of the premises about how we improve and how we move things forward. This isn't easy. We need to give you all types of different ways to approach this. There's positive affirmations, there's new thinking styles and tips and different ways we can approach that. So that's a big part of the coaching as well. So two other components of the coaching philosophy, and a lot based on neuroscience, is the next one is the SCARF model. So what the SCARF model is we are hardwired. We have 5 social dimensions that are hardwired to the subconscious of our brain. And what those are status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. Now, I don't expect you to remember this right now, but status, for example, is our pecking order and how we feel in relation to others. Certainty is how much certainty we have in situations, how much we know, how much unknown is there, because typically people like certainty. They like things to be sure. And that's basically wired in the habit part of the brain, so very strong as well. The autonomy, we want to be independent. We don't want to be controlled by other people, and that's wired into our brains. Relatedness, we want to be able to get along with people. When you first walk into a room of 200 people at a conference or something, most people don't feel the greatest. They're not relating to people, they don't know what's going on. But once they're introduced to a couple people, that's a positive relatedness response. And fairness is just people's understanding or their perception of what's fair. So along these 5 social dimensions that are hardwired to the subconscious of the brain, you can have either a positive response or a negative response. So what we want to try and do is, it doesn't have to be massive or huge, but just try and, over the long term, create some subtle things that'll promote positive responses along the 5 social dimensions for yourself and for others. And the other thing is to be able to understand how you process things. You might have a situation, you have no idea how you responded to that in the past, but now you know how to respond in the future. Or you might be able to apply this stuff moving forward. And I'll give you a quick analogy. I had a job that I resigned from, and when I started, the status was good. It was increased pay. The certainty was good. There was lots of benefits. It was a public sector job with pension, all that kind of good stuff. The autonomy was good. They let me run my own department. The relatedness, it was okay. I had 1 staff member. I would have liked to have a bigger team, but that was okay. And the fairness was great in my mind because they gave me autonomy, because that was important to me. So that was great when I started. Complete positive response. But shortly thereafter, well, I guess 2 or 3 years after, things started to change a little bit. So on the status side of things, or my pecking order, the way I felt I related to other people, I thought I'd been there for a couple of years. It was time for me to take a VP position, a director position, or I was very ambitious as far as my career goes, so I wanted to move forward. I was starting to think that my current position wasn't quite enough. So my status kind of decreased a little bit, got a bit of a negative response. Certainty, there had been some cuts, a few people had been laid off and so forth. Now I didn't have any issue with my position, but just having that nagging feeling in the back, my certainty went down. When it comes to autonomy, I felt, well, I didn't feel, but some policy and procedures had changed, so some of my autonomy had left. It wasn't a whole lot, but it was just another kind of thing that was kind of nipping at me a little bit, so a bit of a negative response on autonomy and my independence in the department. Relatedness, it actually went up, just because we built a bit of a team, so that was a positive thing moving forward. But then when it got to fairness, I really related fairness to my autonomy and my ability to make decisions on my own, so that also went down too. So you can see how we took the job to start with, because amongst the 5 social dimensions, I pretty much had a positive response all the way across. So it was like, that's definitely the job I want to take, and I want to do that. But over time, I had a few negative responses, or a little bit different, and it kind of shifted the balance. But because it was probably so positive to start with, the negative response was maybe a little bit more intense moving forward. So what happened is I ended up resigning from that job. But thinking back in hindsight, now I know what types of things influenced my decision, but also it's going to help me to make different decisions, or new decisions, or understand my decisions as we move forward, right? So a very effective tool. The last part of the coaching is just a quick overview, because there's so many different things we can do in coaching. There'll be no hot coals. We won't be walking over any hot coals. We won't be singing Kumbaya, and we probably won't be catching people as they fall and all that kind of good team building stuff. But what we will do is base it on neuroscience. We'll base it on best practices. We'll use a number of tools. We'll use behavioral assessments. We use one of the top behavioral assessments there is, which is the DISC. And there's different iterations of DISC, but the one we use is 79 questions, scientifically validated, and one of the best on the market. There's a bunch of watered down versions, but this one from Wiley is top notch, and you need to be certified to use that one. There's tons of psychometrics out there. If they provide any kind of value as far as better understanding yourself, that's great, but some are a little bit better than others. Other things that we might use, we might talk about emotional intelligence, and that's how we manage our emotions to be more effective, to motivate ourselves, and all those other typical types of actions for success. Other things that we'll use include, we'll have lots of goal setting. We'll use SMART goals. You've probably heard that 1,000 times. Specific, measurable, achievable, what is it again? So specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time sensitive. So we'll use SMART goals. What we'll do is we'll create habits and new techniques for you. We'll create schedules, and we'll work together to do all that stuff. But the crux of it is dependent on you and how you view the coaching and your buy-in to the coaching. Because if you're not buying in, and if you're not making progress, and you're not being held accountable, then what we're going to do is we're going to stop the coaching and we're going to move on to something else. We will definitely be supporting you throughout the process. It's not getting into trouble. There's accountability, but there's also there's also support along the way too. So our measure of success is your measure of success and understanding of the tools and application at home, in work, and in personal life. So, and actually there's another application in sports settings as well. When you talk about coaching, it's a similar type of thing, and trying to elicit the best performance. And there's tons of good examples of that. And actually, just as I close here, I'll give you one great sports example. And it was from Michael Phelps, and I believe it was the last Olympics. Michael Phelps is the American Olympic swimmer that's won tons and tons of medals for the U.S. in swimming. So he was up against, I can't remember what it was, one of the swim competitions. And as soon as he jumped off the platform, his goggles automatically shifted off his face. So he was automatically swimming blind in his last heat. So what happened was that he went through the mental process. He clicked into his habits, his good wired habits that had been ingrained over years of training, and he just imagined what every stroke would be, what every breath would be, when the wall would be there, and when to give the final kick in the end. And what he actually did with that is he set an Olympic world record for that one. And it just tells you the power of what happens when you hardwire that good stuff in your brain, and how successful you can be, not only in sports, but also in life and your career. So on that note, that's the foundation for our coaching. If you have any questions, you can visit our website at platepus.com, platepus.com, or I can take some questions as well. So thank you very much.